I still remember the way the morning light touched the curtains that day. Soft, golden, warm. It was the same light that used to dance on my son's face when he was little, when he'd wake up and run into my arms, laughing, calling me Mama. Those were the days when this house was filled with laughter. But that morning, the same light felt cold, like it didn't belong here anymore. I was sitting by the window with my knitting basket, watching the dust float in the air. My hands trembled a little. Age does that to you. But what hurt me more than my weak fingers was knowing that my home no longer felt like mine. Ever since my son married Emily, everything had changed. First, I tried to love her. I told myself she was young, maybe just adjusting. I cooked her favorite meals, folded her laundry, even gave her my mother's ring as a blessing. But slowly, she started showing who she really was. Sharp words, colder stares, and a voice that turned my son against me one whisper at a time. She'd tell him I was forgetful, that I misplaced his things, that maybe I needed rest in a nursing home. And he believed her. My son, the same boy I carried in my arms when his father died, now looked at me like I was a burden. I remember one evening I overheard her say to him, "Your mom's stuck in the past, David. She doesn't belong here anymore." And he didn't defend me. He just sighed. That silence. It was louder than any slap could have been. But I stayed quiet. Because mothers always do, don't we? We carry pain in our chests and still smile when our children walk by. We tell ourselves it's just a phase. That they'll remember one day who we are. Then came the day that broke me. It was a Saturday. Emily had been restless all morning, pacing around. I thought maybe she was cleaning. But when I walked into the living room, my heart froze. She was holding a small box. My box. The one where I kept all my old photographs, my wedding locket, my husband's watch, and the letters he wrote me before he passed away. "Emily, please," I whispered, my voice shaking. "That's all I have left of him." She didn't even look at me. "These old things are clutter, Margaret. We need space. You should have thrown them away years ago." Before I could move, she tossed the box into the fireplace. Flames rose high, swallowing decades of my life in seconds. I screamed her name, but she only smiled, a cruel, proud smile. And my son wasn't home to see it. I fell to my knees, watching the pictures curl into ash. My husband's handwriting turned into smoke right before my eyes. I felt my soul burn with it. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. My home, my heart, my past gone. But Emily didn't know. I had already installed a small camera near the bookshelf weeks ago. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I felt something was coming. Something dark. And as I sat there crying, that tiny red light on the camera blinked quietly, recording everything. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up staring at the walls. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hate my son for letting her destroy what I built. But I couldn't. All I felt was an ache so deep it made my bones hurt. Still a part of me whispered, "Wait. Be patient. The truth always comes out. Because when people destroy others, they forget that pain remembers. And sometimes, pain keeps proof." Tell me, my dear, what would you do if the person you raised turned against you? If the one you loved most allowed someone to burn your whole life right in front of you? Would you forgive them? Or would you wait like I did, for the day truth burns brighter than fire itself? If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, stay with me, because what happened next even I never saw coming. That night, as the clock struck midnight, I opened my laptop and played the video. I watched Emily's reflection in the flames, her smirk, her words, her cruelty. It was all there. Proof. My hands shook as I copied the file onto a small drive and hid it inside my old diary. That diary was the one thing she never touched, because she said, "Old people write boring things." She didn't know that inside that diary, her fate was written. And that, my dear, was the moment I stopped being the weak old woman she thought I was, and became someone she should have feared. That night felt endless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fire again. My memories turning to smoke, her face glowing in the light of destruction. I sat in silence until the world outside turned gray, and the first light of dawn touched the ashes in the fireplace. The air still smelled like burnt paper. I reached into the fireplace and picked up a small piece of a photo. It was half of my husband's smile. The rest was gone. I pressed it to my heart, my tears falling on the soot. That was when I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. But one day, Emily would know what she took from me, and what I still had. I spent the next few days pretending nothing had happened. I smiled when my son came home. I made him tea, asked about his work, even complimented Emily's new dress. Became invisible by choice. I knew silence scared her more than words ever could. One evening she found me sitting on the porch. "You're quiet lately," she said, her voice filled with fake sweetness. I looked at her and smiled softly. "Age teaches us silence, dear. Words lose meaning when hearts are already deaf." She frowned. She didn't understand what I meant. And that was good, she wasn't supposed to. When my son came home that night, she ran to him, whispering things again. I could see her pointing at me through the kitchen window. He looked at me once, tired, distant, like I was already fading from his life. "Mom," he said that night, "maybe it's time you move somewhere peaceful. Somewhere you can be taken care of." I nodded slowly, pretending not to notice the relief in Emily's eyes. "Of course, dear," I whispered. "If that's what makes you happy." He hugged me. For a moment I felt my boy again, the same warmth, the same heartbeat I once carried. But when he let go, it felt like the end of something sacred. They started searching for nursing homes the next week. I packed my things quietly. But among the clothes and old books, I slipped the small flash drive, the one with the video, inside a folded sweater. Before I left, I took one last walk around the house. Every corner held a memory. My husband's laughter in the kitchen, my son's first steps near the hallway, the birthdays, the Christmas mornings. All gone. All replaced by silence and cold perfume. Emily watched me from the stairs, her arms crossed. "You'll be happier there," she said. "It's better for everyone." I smiled, my voice soft and steady. "You're right, dear. But remember, happiness built on someone's pain never lasts." She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and walked away. I left the next morning. The house looked smaller as the cab pulled away. I didn't look back, not once. I knew if I did, my heart would break again. The nursing home wasn't terrible. It was quiet, clean, filled with old faces who smiled without reason. The nurses were kind. They called me Miss Margaret. But my soul still lived inside those burnt walls. Every night, I replayed that fire in my mind, waiting for the right moment to use what I had. Days passed. Weeks. I wrote letters to my son, short ones, asking how he was, how Emily was doing. He replied less and less. Sometimes not at all. But I didn't lose hope. I knew life had its way of showing people the truth, sooner or later. One evening, while I was having tea in the garden, I overheard two nurses whispering. "Did you hear about that big argument at the Wilson house?" One said. "The neighbors said there were police cars outside." My heart skipped a beat. The Wilson house. That was my house. I excused myself and went to my room, closing the door softly. My hands trembled as I turned on the small TV. The local news flashed images of my home, or what used to be mine. The front door was shattered, windows broken. My son standing outside, arguing with someone off camera. Emily's name came up in the report. Words like fraud, debt, stolen money filled the screen. My breath caught in my throat. It turned out Emily had been taking money from my son's business account. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. She'd used my son's name to take a loan. And when he found out, she blamed me. Said I manipulated her, that I'd always hated her. I turned off the TV and stared at the wall. So this was it. The house she wanted all to herself was now nothing but a battlefield. The lies she built had begun to crumble. The next morning my son came to visit. I hadn't seen him in months. He looked older, tired, and broken. He sat beside me, holding my hand gently. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't see it before. You were right about her." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I never wanted to be right, David, I whispered. I just wanted you to see. He told me she had left him, taken what little money she could, and disappeared. The police were looking for her. He said he didn't know what to do now. Everything felt empty. I looked at him for a long moment, then slowly reached for my bag. From it I took out the old diary. There's something you should see, I said quietly. He frowned, opening it, flipping through the pages until he found the small flash drive tucked inside. What's this? Proof, I said, my voice barely a whisper, of the night she burned our home. He looked up at me, disbelief in his eyes. You recorded it. I nodded slowly. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I knew one day, the truth would save you. He hugged me tightly, his tears wetting my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Mom. I let her turn me against you. I closed my eyes, feeling his arms around me, the same warmth I thought I'd lost forever. For the first time in years I felt like a mother again. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over yet. The world had a way of bringing justice full circle. And Emily's turn was still to come. When David left that day, I sat by the window for a long time. The light outside felt softer than before, like the world had finally begun to breathe again. But inside me there was a quiet storm, a part of me that still waited for closure. A week later he came again, this time with a USB drive in his hand and a question in his eyes. Mom, he said, can I see it with you? I don't think I can watch it alone. We played the video together on the old laptop the nurses kept for residents. The screen flickered and there she was. Emily, her hair glowing in the firelight, her eyes cold as winter. We watched her lift the box, heard her cruel little laugh, saw the flames rise. My son's hand covered his mouth. His body went still. When the fire reached the photos, he turned his face away and whispered, She really did this. I didn't answer. I let the silence tell the truth. The room felt heavy the way air feels before rain. After a while he closed the laptop and sat quietly, holding my hand like he used to when he was small. I'm going to make this right, Mom, he said softly. I shook my head. No, son. Let life handle her. Revenge has its own time. And it always arrives uninvited. But David was his father's son. Strong, stubborn, unwilling to let evil breathe. The next day he took the video to his lawyer, and within a week, the footage was in the hands of the police. They reopened the fraud case. The moment Emily's face appeared in that recording, everything changed. She was found in a small apartment 2 towns away, living under a fake name. The police said when they arrested her, she tried to act innocent, crying that it was all a misunderstanding. But the world doesn't pity crocodile tears. David came to me after it was done. They're pressing charges, he said quietly. She'll have to face court. I only nodded. My heart should have felt lighter, but there was a strange emptiness inside me. When you lose your home, your memories, your trust, it's not justice that heals you. It's peace. And peace doesn't come quickly. That night, I walked outside into the nursing home garden. The moon hung low, pale and tender. I whispered to the wind. Did you see, James? She burned our home, but she couldn't burn our truth. I like to think my late husband heard me somewhere beyond the stars. The next few weeks were quiet until one rainy evening when David called. His voice trembled. Mom, she wants to talk to you. I didn't expect that. I thought she'd hate me forever, not reach out. But curiosity, I suppose, is a strange companion. So the next morning I went with David to the courthouse. They led me to a small room where she waited behind glass. Emily looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Her hair unkempt, her eyes red and tired. The arrogance was gone. When she saw me, she looked down at her hands. Mrs. Wilson, she began, her voice weak. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I just wanted a life that felt like mine. I watched her for a long moment before speaking. And you thought destroying mine would build yours? She started crying. Real tears this time. I'm sorry, I sighed. Sorry is a word that comes too late, Emily. But life, it always teaches what we refuse to learn. She pressed her palm against the glass. Please tell David not to hate me. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff but my voice steady. He doesn't hate you, dear. He pities you. That's worse. Then I walked out, leaving her sobs behind. For the first time I didn't feel small or broken. Felt free. Outside, David waited in the hallway. What did she say? Nothing new, I answered gently. Just the sound of regret. We drove back in silence. Rain streaked the windows like tears we didn't have to shed anymore. When we reached the nursing home, he turned to me and said, I'm moving you out of here. We'll build something new, Mom. Small house near the lake maybe. Somewhere peaceful. Smiled. Not for me, son. For us. That night I dreamed of my old home. Not the fire, not the ashes, but the way it used to be. The sound of the piano, my husband's laughter, my little boy chasing his toy car down the hall. When I woke I was crying, but it wasn't the same kind of tears. These were lighter, gentler, like morning rain after a long drought. Emily's trial came and went. She was sentenced quietly, without drama. People moved on, but her name became a whisper in town. One of those stories neighbors share with lowered voices. For me, I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. Justice had already happened the moment my son saw the truth with his own eyes. The world could punish her body. My forgiveness was what freed my soul. In the weeks that followed, David kept visiting, bringing plans, blueprints, excitement. We talked about gardens and porches, about colors for the walls. I chose pale yellow, it reminded me of hope. One afternoon, while he was showing me pictures of the land he'd bought, he said quietly, Mom, I found something in the ashes when I went back. He reached into his pocket and handed me a tiny, half-burned pendant. My husband's watch charm, the one I thought was lost forever. I held it against my heart, closing my eyes. It was warm from his hand, and for a second, it felt like time itself had forgiven me. Dad would be proud of you, I whispered. David smiled through his tears. No, Mum. He'd be proud of you. That night I looked out at the sky again. The stars seemed brighter, as if they knew everything had come full circle. The fire had taken my home, yes. But not my strength, not my truth, not my love. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way life teaches us what truly belongs to us. The lake house stood on the edge of a small hill, surrounded by tall birch trees and fields of wildflowers that swayed with every whisper of wind. When I first saw it, I felt something in my chest loosen, like the world was finally giving me back a piece of peace it had taken. David walked beside me, holding my arm carefully. It's not fancy, he said shyly, but I thought it felt like you. Smiled. Simple things last longer, son. Fancy things burn faster. We both laughed softly. For the first time in what felt like forever, our laughter didn't echo off the walls of pain. It filled the open air and stayed there. The new house was small but warm. Pale yellow walls, white curtains that danced with a breeze, and a small garden where I planted marigolds, just like I used to. David built a porch swing, and every evening we'd sit there together, watching the sun melt into the lake. Sometimes he'd talk about work or the plans he had to rebuild his business. Other times we just sat in silence. That silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, like two souls breathing together after a storm. One evening, while the sky turned orange and gold, David said quietly, I saw her yesterday. At the courthouse again. She looked lost. I nodded slowly. She was lost long before she met you. He didn't answer right away. He just stared out over the lake. Do you ever regret it, Mom? Not fighting back sooner. I thought about that for a moment. Regret. Well, pain has a strange way of teaching us timing. If I'd shouted that night, no one would have heard me. But silence. Silence carried farther than I ever thought it could. He smiled, though his eyes were wet. You're stronger than anyone I know. I chuckled softly. Strength doesn't mean not breaking, David. It means knowing how to gather your pieces quietly when no one helps. The wind rustled the leaves, carrying the faint scent of the lake water. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "James, our boy came back." Sometimes at night, I'd hear the faint sound of frogs by the water and the hum of crickets. And in those moments I'd remember everything, the fire, the lies, the tears. But instead of breaking me, the memories began to feel lighter, like old scars that no longer hurt when touched. Months passed. Seasons changed. The house filled with new memories, ones that didn't smell of smoke or betrayal, but of coffee, flowers, and laughter. One afternoon, while I was watering the garden, the postman brought a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Emily. She wrote from the correctional center. The letter was short. "Mrs. Wilson, I've had too much time to think. I know I destroyed things I could never rebuild. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find peace because I never will." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside the same diary that had once hidden the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just whispered, "You were part of the fire that taught me warmth." That night I told David about the letter. He looked angry at first but then sighed. "You don't have to forgive her, Mom." He nodded. "I already did, son. Not for her sake, for mine." He squeezed my hand gently. "You always find a way to end things with grace." Grace. Maybe that was all I ever had left after the fire. But it was enough. When spring returned, the garden bloomed brighter than before. Marigolds, daisies, and lavender painted the yard in soft colors. One evening I placed a small framed photo on the porch table. A photo of my husband and little David, smiling at the old house before it was gone. The edges were burned, but the faces remained. I whispered to the picture, "We lost the house, but we found ourselves again." As the sun dipped below the trees, I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the water brushing the shore. The years had taken much from me. My home, my youth, my strength, but they gave me something even greater, clarity. I realized revenge hadn't healed me. Truth had. And love, the quiet, patient kind, had done what fire couldn't destroy. David sat beside me, resting his head lightly on my shoulder. "I'm thinking of selling the old property," he said. "There's nothing left there." I looked at him and smiled softly. "No, son. There's something left. A lesson." He nodded, understanding without another word. We sat there together as the sky deepened into twilight. A gentle breeze carried the scent of marigolds across the porch. I closed my eyes and let it fill me. In that moment I felt my husband's presence again, not as a memory but as peace. Sometimes life burns everything you thought you needed, just to show you what can't be taken away. The house may have turned to ashes, but love, true love between a mother and her child, rose quietly from the smoke and built something stronger. So if you ever find yourself standing in the ruins of what once was, remember me. Remember this old woman who lost everything but still found peace. And know that even when fire takes your home, it can never touch your heart. That's how my story ends, dear one. Not with revenge that destroyed, but with truth that rebuilt. Because sometimes the sweetest justice is simply surviving, and still being kind.